From the red earth of Mexico, it's coming. From China, a piece of the Great Wall, it's coming.
You've got to be there. The 1982 World's Fair.
From every corner of the earth, it's coming. And it's coming soon. You've got to be there.
Point me in the right direction. I'll be there.
The 1982 World's Fair. You've got to be there.
I'll 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 be there.
If you want to see how history is being made in Tennessee, you've got to be there.
Columbia, you have okay to land in Knoxville?
Roger, Houston, we'll be there.
The 1982 World's Fair. You've got to be
In its magically beautiful setting by the Golden Gate, the Palace of Fine Arts, the last surviving memory of the Phantom City, still proudly stands in stately grandeur, and where Palace of Fairyland have been replaced by countless homes. Turning back the pages of time, we find President William Howard Taft breaking ground on February the 25th, 1911, for the Phantom City. And then, after an army of architects, artists, and engineers had dreamed their best dreams and had brought them to life, it was ready. Magnificent courts and fountains, its walls of creamy travertine, its ever-blooming gardens stretching along the shores of the Golden Gate. At a signal from President Wilson, the fountain of energy burst into activity. The gates were thrown open and the world had its first glimpse of the Phantom City. What a sight and what a crowd, all eager to explore its mysteries and marvel at its splendor. Mayor James Rolfe Jr. dedicated the Phantom City. Charles C. Moore, its president, spoke in response. Secretary Franklin K. Lane represented President Wilson, and Governor Hiram Johnson spoke for California. It was a great day and a great crowd. The Tower of Jewels, beautiful beyond description, sparkling with hundreds of thousands of multicolored jewels in the brilliant sun or in the night illumination, it was the central and dominant feature of the Phantom City. In the center of the lovely South Gardens, the Fountain of Energy, flanked on either side by twin mermaid pools, greeted the eye of the visitor. And to the left was the Crystal Dome Palace horticulture, Byzantine architecture suggesting the Mosque of Ahmed I in Constantinople, housing within strange and beautiful plants from all the tropical world. To the right, Festival Hall, a shrine where music lovers worshipped and where world-famous notables spoke to huge gatherings. And just back of the tower was the Court of the Universe, with the two famous statues, the rising sun and the setting sun. Now the Court of Abundance embraced the beautiful fountain of the earth. The fountain series graced the symbolic court of four seasons. The Court of Palms, with its sunken pool containing that beloved statue, the end of the trail. Majestic colonnades surrounded the court of flowers and the Beauty and Beast fountain. The Fine Arts Palace, with its priceless art treasures in its exquisite setting by the lagoon, will live in memory forever. Sculptors from all over the world brought their skill to adorn the Phantom City. Every school of art was represented. Palaces and courts and fountains all carried their quota of sculptural beauty. These few statues are but a reminder of the countless others just as lovely. And the distances were magnificent. Now here's a glimpse down the Avenue of Palms, a vision of breathtaking beauty. Machinery Hall Avenue lit past the largest wooden building ever constructed, and where was staged the only indoor flight in aviation history. There's only a time for a glimpse of the many state and foreign buildings, picturesque and individual, and housing rare exhibits from the far corners of the earth. Remember the little auto trains rushing busily about? The electric chairs, they're not dangerous, but stubborn. And the one-man push chairs, well, pedestrians, though, were in the majority. And the 4 million square feet of pavement echoed to the beat of tired feet. Never was a more welcome guest than the Liberty Bell, carried all the way from Philadelphia in a flower-decked car, symbolizing the spirit of American freedom. The magic of his own invention brings back the Thomas Edison of a bygone day, with his pal, Henry Ford, in a happy, carefree moment. And just look at this automobile race. Here they come, with all 2 cylinders roaring. Hey, 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 look out there. Not even 4-wheel brakes would slow up these speed demons. Styles have changed since 1915, haven't they? And look at this Merry Widow Waltz, or is it the Grizzly Bear? No, don't laugh. You dance that way too. You know, look, it's the zone, the playground of the Phantom City. A mile of gaiety. And do you remember Stella? The submarines? The aeroscope? You know, here all the nations of the earth came to play. The Indians shook their eagle feathers, the Samoans and the Maoris danced their ritual rhythms to tom-toms beating, and the Mexicans danced to the soft guitar. You know, I wonder where these little maypole dancers are today. Rid of all the concessions with the 5-acre miniature of the Panama Canal, with real water, the locks and lakes and ships all performing for the delighted spectators who viewed the spectacle from a traveling train. Here are the Daffodil Girls, all dolled up to visit the Phantom City. You know, many organizations, long forgotten, paraded gaily through these grounds. That day, a boy in his teens, Art Lindbergh, never had a heartier reception. Assembling his suicide plane, fashioned from bamboo, the motor perched just behind the aviator's head looks strangely unfamiliar in this day of 20-passenger cabin planes. But remember, Art Smith was a pioneer. Mr. Lincoln Beechey, aviation martyr of the Phantom City. Petterossi, another pioneer, was willing to take long chances with such a flimsy set of wings, flapping wires and bicycle wheels, but he did almost anything in the air that modern flyers can do. Art. Aviators were daredevils in 1915, and the crowd loved them. A hero Smith, on his perilous perch, is getting ready for the first illuminated night flight in aviation history. Over the brilliant lights of the Phantom City, he soared and dived and looped with strings of fire behind him like twin comets blazing across the uncharted skyways. Then, swooping to earth, the wings of his plane, a mass of flames, never to be forgotten thrill. And do you remember the Phantom City at night? All the beauty in the world seemed concentrated there. Buildings were bathed in a soft radiance of colored lights, while the fountains glistened with a myriad of color. Great rainbows were cast on clouds of steam, and there were no real clouds to reflect the light. And then, in December 1915, the last lights of the Phantom City flickered out, its fountains forever silenced. We stood with tear-dimmed eyes, feeling that it was not the end, but only a beginning.
You're watching Sleepcore, media for insomnia.
Everybody's planning to see Seattle's spectacular $100 million World's Fair.
So pack up your troubles and forget your cares. Pack up your family and head for the fair in Seattle.
Welcome to the future and all the wonders of the 21st century in the greatest preview the world has ever seen.
Take away ahead, look at tomorrow, just as if you were there.
Rocket ride to Mars in the breathtaking U.S. Science Pavilion. See the fabulous city of tomorrow in the gigantic, wall-less, pillarless Coliseum. Have fun with the happy-go-lucky crowds.
Pack up your troubles.
For 6 wonderful months.
Pack up your family and head for the fair.
It's the big thrilling adventure of a lifetime. Opening April 21st to October 21st in Seattle.
It's the biggest, they say, the most beautiful, the most awe-inspiring, the most colorful, the most spectacular event of this era, the New York World's Fair. In a word, it's the greatest. Yes, the New York World's Fair is the greatest. That's what people have said. Your friends, your neighbors, your own customers who by the millions have responded to that old folk song invitation of, "Hi-ho, come to the fair." And have they ever come? Look at this World's Fair parking lot at the fairgrounds. 10,000 cars. Count them. What state are you from? What city or town? Look around, and you'll find license plates of cars from every state in the country. But even before leaving the huge parking area and starting on the trip through the fair, a familiar name greets the visitors. And below the name, the most advanced in ultra-modern service stations, designed and built by Sinclair, especially for the World's Fair. The eye-catching circular station is surrounded by 3 circular pump islands. Each island has 2 orbiting satellite gasoline pumps and a central customer service cabinet. Pumps roll to the customer's car as if by magic. This marvel is a first in the oil industry. A world of wonders by Sinclair, the exclusive retail supplier of all petroleum products sold at the World's Fair. Every day, thousands of motorists view this novel service feature. Some, your own customers. Some, the same motorists who pass your station every day. When they get home, they remember the name Sinclair. They remember the fast, courteous service. The idea is to get them to stop in at your station for more of the same. This World's Fair parking lot accommodates 10,000 cars a day. And anytime you have 10,000 cars in one place, there are going to be service problems, all kinds. Including this. A motorist in need is a Sinclair service opportunity indeed. That's why fast, efficient Sinclair help is always ready just around the corner, thanks to special service facilities throughout the parking areas. 25 service telephones connect directly with Sinclair service. Calls for help are answered promptly by a specially equipped service car. This is another example of the kind of service Sinclair is telling motorists at the fair to expect wherever they see the name Sinclair. Across the fairgrounds, there's another 10,000 car parking lot. Here, too, a Sinclair service station welcomes travelers from all parts of the nation to the excitement of the fair. Incidentally, the fleet of more than 300 buses that takes motorists from parking lots to the fair gates also uses Sinclair products. But not everybody comes to the fair by car. One of the outstanding features of the World's Fair is this modern marina, the largest on the eastern seaboard, equipped to handle 1,000 boats at regular berths and at the many offshore moorings. In addition to private boats, visitors also come by speedy hydrofoils. These run on a regular schedule from New York City. A feature of this marina is an ultra-modern floating service station, a completely new concept in marine service designed by Sinclair. Boat customers are served the way they like to be served, at sea. Another example of pioneering by Sinclair. This marina will continue in operation after the fair is over. Another way Sinclair makes favorable impressions. Impressions on which you can capitalize at your service station. But now, on to the fair itself. Just what is it in the array of exhibits your neighbors and customers want to see most? Well, with some, it's the Unisphere. The world as it looks from 6,000 miles away. The largest model of the Earth ever built. An achievement in architecture, it's also the symbol and motto of the fair itself. Peace through understanding. Some folks head first for the exhibit where they can see the world's largest outdoor photographic prints in color. Here, 15 exhibit sections demonstrate dramatically the influence of photography on many aspects of modern life. Then there are those who are attracted to a dramatization of the history of electricity, from its beginning to the mighty bang of nuclear fission. And here's the spot they head for, the General Electric exhibit. And these same people probably also take in the exhibit where the wizardry of modern chemistry is presented with entertaining showmanship. The biggest always has an appeal to some of us. And here is the world's largest electronic carillon. More than 600 bells. Our country's challenge to greatness. This theme has a special appeal to many. In the United States Pavilion, colorful presentations trace America's progress from the dramatic past to the challenge of space travel. Some visitors with a faraway look in their eyes are particularly interested in exhibits of faraway lands and places. Exhibits that, through art, atmosphere, and architecture, bring pieces of the world to one World's Fair. Many people have a special interest in the history of transportation. Old and new. You'll find some of them watching intently the steady parade of helicopters taking off and landing on the roof of the New York Port Authority building. You'll also find them standing in line to get a tantalizing glimpse of what life will be like not too many decades from now. And at the Ford exhibit, they will enjoy a unique and exciting trip through a fantasy land of the past, present, and future. Or you'll find them shaking their heads in awe as they view a gigantic 100-foot engine model. And again, as they view a new experimental turbine power car, possibly a car of the future. Fuel, lubrication, Sinclair, of course. 34 million people visited the fair in its first year. And during that year, close to 6 million of them visited Sinclair Dinoland. Not only are they welcome to the exhibit, but as a means of getting more closely acquainted with Sinclair dealers, each family receives a special coupon good for a free gallon of gasoline at their local Sinclair dealer station. These are a few of the millions of car-owning, traveling Americans who will be telling their friends about the fair and about Sinclair Dinoland for years to come. Sinclair Dinoland, in a prime location, surrounded by titans of American industry. One of the most popular exhibits of the New York World's Fair. A world of wonders that flourished 200 million years ago. A vanished world, recreated by Sinclair. Youngsters and adults alike stand in awe of a world that was. Here, too, there are interesting favorites. The ponderous Trachodon, 32 feet long and 14 feet high. 1,500 teeth, and not a single cavity. Tyrannosaurus, king of the tyrant lizards. Not much on looks, maybe, but popular with many visitors. 50 feet from tip to tip, 20 feet high. Fiercest creature that ever lived. A real mean kid. With 6-inch daggers for teeth, he was the terror of his neighborhood. Triceratops, sort of a 30-foot walking battering ram. That skull measures 7 feet. The Ankylosaurus is also popular, if you judge by the amount of attention he gets. The world's first armored tank, you might say. That trunk is completely covered with thin, bony plates. If the situation called for still more protection, he simply grew spears which projected from his body armor. Stegosaurus, 25 feet long, weighing 4 tons. A versatile sort of chap. He won a lot of arguments in his time, but very few beauty contests. No wonder Dinoland is so popular with so many fair visitors, is on so many must-see lists. And of course, there's that face so familiar to all of us. Our own Dino. On formal occasions, he's called Brontosaurus. Big fella, isn't he? 70 feet long. Tips the scales at a substantial 35 tons, which makes him about the right size for a company like ours. As a result of being featured as the Sinclair trademark, Brontosaurus is world famous. The miniature of Brontosaurus is one of the highlights of Dinoland. visitors make their own souvenirs. This has helped make it a favorite. In fact, Dino is the most popular souvenir sold at the fair. The New York World's Fair. Something for everybody. And wherever you turn, something of awe, interest, excitement, and wonder. The millions of people who have already visited this wondrous fair dedicated to industry, understanding, and peace are a glowing tribute to the compelling magnetism of the fair. And there is still another year of great promise ahead of us. Another year of opportunity during which Sinclair's many activities at the World's Fair will create a favorable image for the Sinclair name and for the 25,000 Sinclair dealers who sell the finest petroleum products to the motoring public.
You're watching Sleepcore. Pleasant dreams.
Dad's read about it. You'll visit firsthand the fantastic world of the year 2000 and thrilled with an authentic voyage through space a billion light years beyond the moon. Mom's heard about it.
Just imagine a 600-foot observation tower with a glass-enclosed revolving restaurant at the top. And picture those glamorous bazaars along the boulevards of the world.
All the kids know about it.
You can ride on a real high-speed monorail.
And have wonderful fun with the fabulous Dayway. Hooray!
The Seattle Century 21 Exposition. Yes, for the family vacation of a lifetime, filled with fun, as exciting as tomorrow, and truly educational.
Let's skedaddle
to Seattle
this summer.
Right, folks. Families everywhere will be heading for the scenic Northwest and the Seattle World's Fair, April 21st to October 21st.
The largest World's Fair ever, Expo 67. The International Twin Island Wonderland is ready for its gala opening ceremonies. Host Canada is among 62 nations who have built 100 pavilions on the 1,000-acre site of entertainment and education. The lighting of a permanent torch is part of Inauguration Day ceremonies. The multi-million-dollar fair is spread over 2 man-made islands in the St. Lawrence River. Premier Lester Pearson, in pre-opening formalities, touches off the torch, symbolic of the spirit of Expo. The fair marks the 100th anniversary of Canada. It will run for 6 months. Canadian Air Force jets roar overhead, saluting the opening, while 7,000 guests watch from the ground. It's expected that some 35 million people will come to the exposition. Spectacular fountains, curving, sweeping towers and minarets, majestic waterfalls combine in a feast for the eye. For sightseers, there are plenty of sights to see. The universal exhibits symbolize more than just beautiful buildings. They constitute the most modern advances in art, science, and culture. The amusement area has everything to help the visitor relax, have fun, and enjoy himself. Traditional rewards of any fair. The U.S. Pavilion has a built-in mini rail train, a meeting place of peoples, promoting mutual respect and understanding. Expo.
$1939, the New York World's Fair. 1904, the St. Louis Fair. 1889, the Paris International Exposition. From earliest times, markets and fairs have been a gathering place where men came not only to trade, but to exchange ideas. As civilizations grew, as communications improved between nations, peoples of the world looked for new ways to display their industrial and cultural accomplishments. With the coming of the Industrial Revolution, the Industrial Fair was born. London, 1851. Over this world of squatting stones and twisting streets arose a strange and unbelievable structure, the Crystal Palace. It was built for and became the symbol of the London Exposition of 1851, the first World's Fair. With each succeeding fair, people came from greater distances. Fair buildings introduced new materials in daring engineering and architectural concepts. Timekeepers of progress. In 1889, there arose over Paris the theme symbol of the Paris International Exposition, the Eiffel Tower. Designed by the greatest engineer of his time, Gustave Eiffel. Magician in iron, he was called. The great tower was bold enough to be controversial. A masterpiece of structural engineering, it remained a celebrated landmark, a symbol of world's fairs everywhere. Then, one day in March 1963, notables of both France and the United States gathered at Flushing Meadows, New York, for the beginning of construction of Unisphere, theme symbol for a new World's Fair. Robert Moses, president of the World's Fair Corporation.
We looked high and low for a challenging symbol for the New York World's Fair of 1964 and 1965. It had to be of the space age. It had to reflect the interdependence of men on the planet Earth. And it had to emphasize their achievements and aspirations. It had to be the sign ashore for all visitors, dominating Flushing Meadow and built to remain as a permanent feature of the park, reminding succeeding generations of a pageant of surpassing interest and significance. What stronger, more durable, and more appropriate metal in the record of American constructive accomplishments could be thought of than stainless steel? And what builder more imaginative and competent than the United States Steel Corporation?
In most uncooperative March weather, René Legrand Eiffel, grandson of the creator of the Eiffel Tower, signaled the start of construction of Unisphere. The first member to go into place was one section of the USS Core 10 steel pedestal. Unisphere, the largest representation of our globe ever attempted. Unisphere, the largest stainless steel structure yet built. Stainless steel. Why? Because it is to become a permanent landmark, Unisphere must be virtually maintenance-free, yet remain enduringly beautiful. Stainless steel alone could do the job. Decoratively used for years by architect and designer, it was easy to suggest stainless steel's strength and beauty for a structure so large. Here's what our engineers went to work on. Assignment. For purposes of monumental beauty only, complete a feasible design for a stainless steel structure as high as a 12-story building. If Unisphere were to be harmonious when viewed from any angle, no diagonal bracing could be used between parallels and meridians. Take away such bracing, and conventional structural members normally get heavier and bulkier. But each structural member of Unisphere must appear light and attractive. Perched atop a sculptured base, which must suggest lightness and grace, Unisphere would have to withstand the enormous and changing forces of the wind, as well as its own weight. The continents and islands would act like sails, and wind pressure could exert forces nearly equal to the weight of the entire structure. Because Unisphere is open and its land areas irregular in size and position, the wind blows on either the outside or the inside, the front of a continent or its back. No past experience was available to calculate the wind forces because no one had ever built a Unisphere before, or anything like it. To meet this phase of the challenge, exhaustive wind tunnel tests were conducted at the University of Maryland. From these aerodynamic tests came the data that made design analysis possible. The mathematics of analysis posed its own peculiar challenge. Unisphere had to be completed by April 1964. High-speed computers were used to solve the thousands of problems that would have taken years if attempted manually. In the design of this large bridge, for instance, it was necessary to solve only 35 simultaneous equations. In Unisphere, one problem alone required a solution of 670 simultaneous equations. Design analyzed and approved, fabrication and construction could begin. Thousands of different pieces had to be cut, formed, assembled, and welded. Box girders, tubes, beams, channels, angles. Special automatic and manual welding methods were employed. An upper meridian section is welded. The South Pole is assembled. Land areas were fabricated and assembled on this turtle-shaped fitting table, which duplicated the exact curvature of Unisphere. Conformed to United States Army Engineering Corps contour maps, mountains and valleys are shown in exaggerated relief in order to achieve effective visualization of elevation. Wrapped to protect the stainless beauty, sections were shipped by rail and highway to Unisphere's site. Just ahead of the construction of the pedestal, 30 USS T-1 steel anchor bolts are set and the concrete base poured around them. First structural member to go into place is the South Pole. Next, one of Unisphere's largest members, a lower meridian, is carefully fitted into the South Pole and laid across the pedestal. Actually welded girders, the lower meridians will support the entire structure. Right at the site, many of the members are field welded into sub-assemblies nicknamed orange peel sections. To provide support and access, a temporary mast is placed along Unisphere's polar axis. When the structure is complete, Unisphere will be self-supporting and the mast removed. The southern hemisphere, like a giant bowl, is completed in 83 days. Becomes a world of stainless steel when the last flag-topped section is set in place. Now, addition of the land areas can begin. Delicate work. No job for windy days, though, because the sections act like big kites if not securely held. Continents and islands in place, it remains only to raise the 3 orbit rings. Weighing 3 tons each, the orbit rings are field welded into a continuous single piece 450 feet around. Special care is taken to protect the polished surface. To prevent bending, each orbit ring is lifted by 4 cranes, each attached at 3 points. An intricate communication plan and network links all hands. Precision teamwork means that the orbit rings rise slowly and evenly. About 50 stainless steel guy wires connect each ring to Unisphere, just as spokes tie a bicycle wheel rim to its axle. Strong and light, they are so difficult to see that the rings seem to float in space. Only 162 days after construction was begun, Unisphere is complete. Its challenge successfully met. Crystal Palace, Eiffel Tower, Trilon and Perisphere. Unisphere now joins these and the other memorable timekeepers of progress. A spectacular piece of open stainless steel sculpture, Unisphere is dedicated to man's aspirations towards peace through mutual understanding and symbolizes his achievements in an expanding universe.
You're watching Sleepcore. Sleep tight.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Milliken, Senior Vice President for Networld Plus Interop, and I'd like to welcome you to our final keynote address of this event. You've all heard the phrase, or probably heard the phrase, or seen the bumper sticker, think globally but act locally. Our next speaker is someone who thinks globally and acts globally. He just flew in here from Kazakhstan and has logged about 30,000 real air miles during the last 2 weeks in pursuit of his project. What he's going to tell you about will become part of the foundation for Networld Plus Interop 96 throughout all our events next year. I said this is the final address here, so I suppose it's only fitting that in the final address of the 1995 event, we talk about a platform for 1996 that will be of importance not only to Networld Plus Interop, but also to governments and businesses and society in general across the world. It's my pleasure to introduce Carl Malamud, founder of the Internet Multicasting Society and the driver and creator of the 1996 Internet Worlds Expo. Carl? Okay.
afternoon. It's fashionable to put on a suit and come here and talk about all the APIs you're going to develop, and I decided I would not put on a suit and instead talk about the real world today. I'm going to talk about the future, about the beginning of the information age, which, as you've seen from the press, the hype about the internet, but also the real growth of the internet is about to dawn. I think the best way to look at the future, though, is to look at the past. And the best way to look at the beginning of an information age is to look at how we started the industrial age. In 1859, they built the Crystal Palace as part of the Universal Exposition of the Works of All Nations. That was a formal title for the first World's Fair. The Crystal Palace was the largest indoor structure ever made at the time, and it had all sorts of new machines that had just been invented. The yellow pencil, for example, was displayed there for the first time. Charlotte Bronte, the author, visited this fair, and she wrote a very moving letter in which she talked about the tides of humanity that were swelling in and out of the hall of every machine known to man. The Crystal Palace didn't last. It was torn down after a few years. But the grounds of the fair are dedicated in perpetuity as a public park. It's called Hyde Park in London. For the next 30 years in Paris, there were a series of World's Fairs. You may have heard of the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower was a 1,000-foot iron tower, a true engineering accomplishment. It, of course, was a tourist attraction at the time. Tens of millions of people went and visited it. But even today, the Eiffel Tower gets twice as many visitors as the Louvre. It was also a serious scientific instrument. It was the first wind tunnel. It was the first structure tall enough that you could drop little model airplanes down and see how they fly. And so it was a serious tool for aeronautical research. Two fairs struck me as particularly appropriate for the internet and for the future. In Philadelphia, in 1876, they had the Centennial Exhibition, and that featured, for example, the telephone. But you know, the telephone was considered a talking gadget, and no one really took it seriously. What people were interested in was power, steam power. They had a 13-acre machinery hall, and in the middle of this thing was a 2-story, double-cylinder, coreless steam engine. And that steam engine had 1,500 horsepower, biggest engine ever made. They tell the story about opening day on this hall. It was dead silent, and it was packed. And the Emperor Dom Pedro of Brazil and President Ulysses S. Grant walked up on the podium, and they each hit a lever, which let steam into the engine cylinders. And you could feel the ground shaking, and there was a hiss, and these big walking beams started going up and down, and that sent power into the flywheel. It was gaining momentum. And then all of a sudden, this machinery hall came alive. They had 5 miles of shafts and pulleys and belts, and it powered 3 printing presses, printing daily newspapers inside the hall. There was a machine that was sawing logs. Another machine was printing wallpaper. There were sewing machines. It was truly amazing. But you know what amazed people the most was that steam engine. It had one attendant, and he just sat up on the platform and he read his newspaper all day. 17 years later, 1,500 horsepower wasn't enough. At the Chicago Columbian Exposition, they were going to need a lot more. And this is when electricity was first beginning to happen. A guy named Thomas Edison had installed a power plant in New York using a technology called DC, direct current. A bunch of young Turks, led by George Westinghouse, didn't think DC was going to work, and they proposed an alternative scheme, AC, alternating current. Now, Edison was not pleased. He put a lot of money into his direct current technology and waged a bitter public campaign saying that AC was a threat to public health. All that oscillation couldn't be good for people. And it was non-standard, and we couldn't have everybody inventing their own standard, or where would we be? But for some reason, Westinghouse got the contract for the Chicago Columbian Exposition. And he installed 15,000 horsepower of electricity, powered 90,000 lights. There was a network of 200 synchronized clocks. There was a moving electric railway. It's where people came to learn about electricity It's where people came to be entertained. The Great White Way was a very famous amusement park. That's where the Ferris wheel was invented. It's where the hamburger was also invented. It's also a place where people came to learn about different countries. 28 million people went to Chicago in 1893. The fairs educated and entertained. They challenged engineers, and the best ones left a legacy. Shea Stadium in New York, for example, is a result of the 1964 World's Fair. It's time now for a new World's Fair. It's called the Internet 1996 World Exposition. It's going to be all of 1996. And since it's an Internet World's Fair, it's going to be all over the world. It's really a partnership. It's a partnership of engineers and artists. Engineers like Chris Swanson here from SSDS. His boss has donated half his time for the next 18 months. People like Simon Hackett, you may know of him from the ToasterNet fame. Artists like Kurosawa in Japan, like Peter Gabriel in the United Kingdom, institutions like the Tokyo Aquarium and the Smithsonian. It's also a partnership with world leaders. President Clinton and Vice President Gore are strongly supporting this project. Dr. Kyung, the Minister of Communications in Korea, is personally leading the Korean effort. The Mayor of Amsterdam is supporting the Netherlands effort. And finally, it's a partnership with corporations, with the official organizers of the fair who have put in $200,000 and in some cases much more. Companies like Sun Microsystems that has donated lots of computers, IBM, NBC Television, telecommunications corporations like MCI and KDD and NTT, Korea Telecom. Quantum has donated a terabyte of disk drives, 1,000 gigabytes. Routing corporations like Bay Networks are helping put in a global backbone, Cisco Systems as well. SSDS has donated 2 full-time engineers, and these are good people. These are people that do things like manage the interop, NetNoc. And of course, SoftBank Expos, which is strongly supporting the fair. Let's hear now from some of the U.S. supporters. If we can roll the tape, please.
You've seen Treasure Island at the height of its beauty, with every building bright with color, when every fountain sparkled in the sun, when every court, every road, every hallway was filled with people, when the banners flew and the music crashed out. Now Telenews shows you Treasure Island as it is today, abandoned and deserted. The plaster is cracking, the fountains are still, the flagpoles are bare. There's nobody on Treasure Island today but the seagulls. The gayway is bare, but not in the way it used to be. The barkers are gone, the girls are gone, the giant crane and the octopus and the roller coaster are still. Will they move once more? Will the World's Fair of the West ever be seen again in all its brilliant color, with its crowds and its music? Or will it always be barren like this? We don't know. That's up to the bankers and the creditors. But the giant cash register, which used to turn up the big attendance figures, is all closed up, and it doesn't seem to be in working order. So perhaps this is goodbye to the Golden Gate International Exposition.